Hi, everyone. It's Obi Abuchi here with the Leading from Your Core podcast and Vodcast. This show is dedicated to helping leaders all around the world discover leadership wisdom, stories, and insights that will enable you to tap into the power of leading from the inside out. Our current season is focused on mental resilience among leaders, and I'm delighted to welcome on the show Toye Oshunbiyi. Toye is the founder and CEO of Business Leaders Coach. He's been coaching and training leaders for over 20 years and is passionate about his mission. He is motivated by the belief that organizations that have great leaders become great companies. And that's a belief that's very close to my heart. And besides his business acumen, Toye serves in his local church where he uses his skills voluntarily to help people. Toye enjoys music, traveling, jazz music in particular, playing the saxophone. He's married with 2 children and lives in London with his family. My wife, Bidju, and I have absolutely benefited from Toye and his wife's incredible insight into marriage and other areas of life. So Toye, really, really excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, Obi. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
I know we're going to have an incredible conversation. And as much as I said, this current season is focused on mental resilience, we're going to go in a couple of different angles today. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So our listeners and viewers get to know you a little bit more. I want to start off with just asking you to share about your story. We've all got a story of how we got into doing what we're doing. You running Business Leaders Coach, is that something that you always saw yourself doing, or what was your journey into this?
Yeah, no, thanks. Thank you for that opportunity. So, I guess, first of all, my background, when I look back and I think about, my learning desire to learn, right from small, growing up, I loved reading encyclopedias and things like that. And so sort of just feeding on knowledge, I realized was something that I just did. I just loved to read. But around 1998, going way back now, I started working full-time for my church. And my counterpart and myself, we were overseeing a group of singles, over 100, and was doing that and just not knowing what to do. It was a very, very challenging time, because you think, well, it's a voluntary group and people should be motivated. So I had an assumption that this should be easier to influence and motivate people, but I tried lots of things and they just weren't working. And so I remember going into a bookstore and looking and seeing a DVD stack by John Maxwell titled "The Leader Within," and developing the leader within you and developing the leader around you. Now, these videos, and it was VHSs in those days.
You're taking us back.
I know, I'm taking you
Some of our listeners will have to Google that. Hey, videos? What are those?
Right.
And even the encyclopedias you mentioned.
I know.
You mean Google? What's an encyclopedia?
Yeah, I'm showing my age here, I mean, people might laugh what I'm about to say also, that they cost £95, which I'm thinking, well, but my salary was just over £1,000. So
Wow.
it was a big
investment.
decision. Yeah, so it was a big decision to buy these DVDs. But I did, bite my lip and bought them, and sat down and watched and sat at the feet of somebody who helped me to understand what leadership was all about. And it was in that moment that I became a student of leadership. And
Wow.
If anybody knows John Maxwell, he has a saying, everything rises and falls on leadership, and leadership is influence. And so I can trace it back to then, where I realized that leadership was a separate topic that I needed to develop as a skill, and also help other people, because there's a difference between having the technical knowledge and having the knowledge of how to to help other leaders, or even just how to be a leader. It's almost like a completely different skill set. So that takes me back, and that's what got me into this, and then ended up in learning and development. Started my own company in 2007, and then during the whole market crash, ended up working for a global organization, a staffing global organization, and then became the head of learning over a period of time, developing lots of training courses and coaching a lot of the senior leaders. I was there for over 11 years and saw a lot of what I was able to put into practice to help people, and then started Business Leaders Coach last year, and now working with small, medium-sized businesses that are looking to scale up, and working with the CEO and his or her leadership team. Perhaps they're quite inexperienced, and giving them the tools to be able to develop the behaviors and habits that can help them to take their business to the next level.
Oh, brilliant. I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. And what stands out to me and resonates most is that sometimes people can come at this from a very academic perspective, but what drew you into this space was this dilemma that I want to figure out how to make this work. How does engagement actually work? How does leadership work? What does it look like to actually influence people? And you've come at it from that space of, I want to figure out the tools that actually make this possible. And one of the things, and this, and a lot of the listeners, viewers watching this will realize that just because you're in a position of leadership and a position of authority doesn't mean that you are effective as a leader, or that you even understand what it's about. It's one thing to have the position, it's another thing to have the skills and the mindset to make it work. So
absolutely love
that. So some people, this just comes to mind based on your experience and what we just talked about now. I want to jump into this debate about a leader's born or made. Right? Let's just go there and kind of get that off the table, and then we'll move deeper into one of the topics you were touching on last year that I want to explore with you. But first of all, what's your take on, are leaders born or made?
Well, I've got to quote John Maxwell said, "I've never seen an unborn leader." I mean, it's just so I guess, I mean, just to mention that I think what we're saying is that are some people, do they come with this innate ability to be able to lead? I think that's what when people say that, that's most likely what they're saying. So it is an interesting question, because as we go through being in learning and development, that personality profiling and things like that can lend to certain attributes that people can see quite more natural. Like, for instance, some personality types will be more decisive naturally than hesitant. So there definitely are attributes that can lend towards a certain type of leadership style, right? And it all depends on the environment and where they are at that point in time in history, many different things that would still consider that person a leader, right? And then at the same time, a lot of things, I have a saying that a lot of things are caught, they're not taught. So if you naturally grew up with a great leader, somebody who has that ability to show empathy and connect with people, and maybe it was your parent or somebody that you just grew up with, and you naturally just saw that, without you knowing, you would take in a lot of those attributes, perhaps. And so it could come across like this person is a naturally born leader, but we'll have to go into that person's history to realize that actually this person has been around good leadership, it's been modeled, and this person just took on some of those attributes and was able to build on that. So some people have a bit of an advantage on that spectrum. But then are leaders born or are leaders made? From what we know now, leadership is down to habits. And habits are down to behaviors, and behaviors are down to a thinking pattern. So it's either we're saying that we can't teach or train people a certain thinking pattern, a thought, a mindset, which I don't think is true. I think we can, I think that everybody can be a leader and has to be a leader in this current climate that we're in anyway, or else, you won't be able to survive. And so my answer is leaders, some have attributes that come across as if they were born with it, but it does not mean that leaders can't be made, even if they don't see themselves as a leader. I hope that gives an answer.
Yeah, pretty comprehensive one as well. And once again, a reference to John Maxwell there. He's been quite influential in my life as someone who has just studied leadership and sat at the feet of some of the greats. Obviously, Stephen Covey's book was the first book that really inspired me down this path. So I think your answer as well is quite hopeful for everyone, not only those listening to this, the seasoned leaders, the emerging leaders, to realize I can grow in this area. And even if I moved into a leadership position, and didn't feel I had the skills, this is something that I can absolutely get better and better at.
Absolutely.
Now, you alluded to something, and just before we went live, we're talking about touching on this topic, which is everyone as a leader.
Yes.
Let's just unpack that for us. What does that mean for you, and why is that a significant understanding or perspective for leaders to have? That, because it sounds like you're saying this isn't just about position. I have 3 people reporting into me. I oversee a business, 10, 50 million turnover, whatever the case may be. You're saying everyone's a leader. Just what does that mean? What are the implications?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we have to go back in history to really understand why this concept of everyone a leader is relevant, what I would call in today's world. So if you go back in time, you find out that the structures, the culture, just how things operated was very hierarchical in general. And so the definition of a leader, nobody would even perhaps have that concept or mindset that, a leader, in those days, it was almost like the leader had to know it all. The leader had to be the person who had all the answers. And when you go back in time and you look at our structures of organizations, industrial age, you find out that, there was no way else the employees could get the answers. They didn't have the data, they didn't have anything. And so we have now transitioned into a completely different world. If I was to quote Alvin Toffler, he said that, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think we are now in an age where all of us, it doesn't matter whether you are a leader in position or not, we are all in this transition of all of us have to learn how to live in this new economy. And so what does that mean? It means that we first and foremost have to take responsibility for our own choices. That's the bottom line, is that this leadership thing is now about, if you don't lead yourself, somebody is influencing you in a direction that perhaps you don't even want to go, and you're not even aware. And so to answer the question, what does this mean? It means that everybody has to take on board this mindset that I, as a human being, I have agency. I mean, you made reference to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I mean, he got it right. He said, habit number 1, be proactive, which means you can say yes, you can say no. You can choose how you are going to respond. And that's the beginning of leadership. So when I talk about this kind of leadership, it is not the leader of an organization or the leader in position and title. It is that everybody has to realize that I am leading my life. That's the sort of bottom line point. That's why everyone a leader. And the reason why I emphasize that is because what you find in a lot of discussions I have with different people, and you would know, some people just don't like that word leader. They just don't like it. They just oh no, I don't see myself as a leader. I remember looking at some statistics, and somebody said that they asked a group of people, and many of them said, "Oh, I don't see myself as a leader." And so just the fact that people have that perspective means that there are some decisions that a leader knows they need to make. And the moment you're avoiding that choice of being a leader, that means you're also avoiding some of those choices that you need to make. And that's detrimental to your moving forward, because, as I said, knowing that you have that ability to say yes or no to things is vital in today's world. Vital. I can't overemphasize.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there, and I do want to go deeper into no. I want to go deeper into this, but there's something that you've just referenced a few times, and I want to draw that out for our listeners. Hopefully they've picked it up as well. But you're not talking about position, who do I oversee? You said responsibility. Am I taking responsibility? Am I recognizing that I have a choice? I have a choice to say yes or no. I'm taking ownership for my life. One of the things whenever I've been in a setting with a team, what is it that makes the leader of the team stand out? It's usually if there's a pressurized situation, there's a decision to be made, the leader is usually like, okay, guys, here's what, she'll say this or he'll say that. It's like, here's what we're going to do. And it's just that willingness to say, I'm going to take ownership for this right now, and I'm going to make a choice. I'm not afraid to do that. And it sounds like what you're saying is everyone recognizing that we always have that ability. And that's what it comes down to. Is that
yes,
right?
it is. And just going back to your scenario of the team. So in the past, right, typically what will happen is person A in the team would see something and then expect the leader to flag it up and talk about it, right? It's like, oh, wow, okay, if Obi didn't say it, then maybe I shouldn't, And what I am saying is that in this new economy, right, and this new world that we're in, the team leader can't even see it, can't even see it. And the reason why you are on that team is because you're the one that can see it. And so if you don't realize that you sitting are on that table, that's the reason why you are there, and to communicate that to the team. As long as once the team is clear on its goals and its vision and its objectives, then everybody that takes on that role of leader participates in the journey towards this goal. In the past, as I said, the leader would kind of be the one saying, here we go, and here's the plan and all that. What I'm saying is that in this VUCA world, and for those who don't know, this volatile, uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous. That's the world that we're now in. Everybody has to play their role, in seeing that and contributing. And even if the team leader comes up with an idea, you, as a member of the team, should still voice. If you saw something different and you don't say, you get my point, you're not being a true team member. And that's why, as you said, taking that responsibility is the first thing, isn't it? So I hope that makes sense. So uncovers it a bit.
I love that, and I want to explore a bit more with you just some of the benefits within organizations, there's an analogy that just came to mind as you were talking about just owning that space. I can imagine, and not every one of my listeners or viewers will be big football fans. I'm actually only into football because of my kids. But anyway,
same here. You know, my son he's roped me in.
Yes. Yeah, I have no choice now. But I think of a football team. So you've got a captain of the team, right? You've got the 11 players, and as a player, whether I'm a midfielder, defender, centre back, there you go, I just about know some of the positions. When I'm in my space, I've got to own it.
Yes.
Right? I've got to own it. I can't say, oh, the ball's at my foot. Captain, where are you? What should I do? It's like, well, no, I need to know what I need to do. As you say, hey, we've got an overall vision, right? We need to get the ball over to the other side and into the goal.
Absolutely.
And so I've got to take absolute ownership for my position in partnership, obviously, with my team members. And I recognize their bit and what they've got to do, but everyone a leader in the sense that there are things that I'm absolutely accountable for that impacts the overall goal and performance of our team, our organization, and I've got to take ownership for doing the best I can with my bit. Is that a way of thinking about it?
Yeah, that's right. And so you see, and because of that, you see the role of the team leader is now slightly different.
Sure.
You know? So, as I said, so in the past, the expectation of the leader of that team would be to come up with the answers, the plan, the strategy. But then now, you see, that leader of that team has to harness and cultivate that thinking of the team members, has to empower them to be able to challenge and speak up and see when they say things. And so this is where Google did the research and found out that what are some of the key elements in a team, and number one was psychological safety. So having for me to be able to disagree with you, my team leader, in the meeting, or say I have a different opinion, I have to know that it is safe. And so the shifting around the perspective of the leader, the team leader, has to accommodate that. And that takes a different character quality. It takes humility, it takes openness, it takes, don't hold on to your ideas so tightly. It's a different perspective, and this is being a leader. And as I said, and when you think about I call it 21st century leadership, right? If you think of the 20th century leader, how can he be wrong, or how can she be wrong? How can she be challenged in the room?
How dare you?
Yeah, it's like, what?
Maybe you do as I say.
Yeah, exactly. You see, so it's a huge shift. But what you'll find in many of the companies that are, figuring this out, is that's what is needed today. So it's a different kind of personality. It's a different kind of focus. It's a hunger for the answer, and it's got nothing to do with your title. And I think that so that's sort of, this is maybe, I think we're still in the early stages of this, but it's very, very obvious.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you said it's a huge shift, because I imagine some people listening to us, listening to the analogies, some of the benefits, and they think, okay, yeah, this is a no-brainer. And if it's such a no-brainer, why isn't it happening everywhere, right? So I'd love to explore, you said it's a huge shift. What is it, one, that is holding leaders back from operating in this way now, if the benefits are incredible? I mean, who wouldn't want to unleash more of the potential and capability and agency of their team? So what is holding leaders back, and what can help them make that shift? So let's start off with what's holding them back.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to quote from a book from a good friend, Obi Abuchi, who talks about playing the ego game.
Oh man, wow. And sounds like a great book.
You
Even
know,
if I say so myself.
you know, and what you said in your book, and if you haven't bought it, buy it definitely. You know, leading from your core. But what you said about it's the ego game. So in as much as it's tempting to say it's the things out there, you know, the desire for profit, the desire for, you know, a promotion, like those would be the things that you would hear. You know, people, they don't want to give up the benefits of all the accolades and the position of being a leader, like those. But those are the outward things. But if you really boil it down to maybe like one thing, it will be ego. It will be ego, and that's challenging to give up because it's a risk. You know, it's a risk, and you know, I just published a podcast at the time of us recording this podcast. I just released a podcast this week, you know, and I went through 5 great books I read in 2021. One of them was yours. Another one was the book, The Heart of Business by Hubert Joly, who was the former CEO of Best Buy. Fantastic book because I would say he is a vision of CEOs of the future. And we're sort of there now, but, you know, in terms of really the things that he had to give up, the things that he had to rethink, you know, taking on feedback from anybody and everybody, placing people above profit. And these are things, having a very clear purpose. And these are things, as you know, good to great. A lot of people have their purpose and their vision and all those things on the wall and all. But they're still, for many organizations, they are still external things that it's like, oh, everybody's doing it, we need to do it. And it's only those where, when it comes from the heart, that you're seeing the follow through. So the reason why it's a huge shift is because at the end of the day, you know, this is always coming back to the individual about leading yourself first. And so that's the reason why it's not something that can be mandated or commanded. You know, it's a personal choice that a person has to make. And when you see the big leader, like, as I said, Hubert Joly, when you read his story, when you read how he came to terms with it, he first of all understood this perspective intellectually. He said, you're speaking to his sort of mentor who told him this, and he's like, all of them agreed. He said it took a number of years before he realized that he had to put it into practice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll put a link in the show notes to that podcast you mentioned and Hubert Joly's book as well. It's, and before we go into how leaders can make that shift, you know, that emphasis on the ego game. And I know one of the things you talk a lot about is, you know, self-mastery. And I talk about it from just this perspective of leading from the inside out. You've really got to know how your ego is sabotaging your effectiveness as a leader. And you're right, it does take awareness. It's they say the longest journey in the world, right? Is journey from the head to the heart. It's one thing to get things intellectually. And lots of leaders read, they've got lots of information, right? And I think almost addicted to information. But information doesn't equal transformation. No, the transformation comes when we get it, when we internalize it, when we're implementing it. And I just recently was having a conversation with some people about just the ego game and just translating it into the language of, as leaders, we get a lot of our worth, right, from here's what I do. I run this phenomenal organization, you know, 200 million turnover, you know, that's what I do. And so if that's taken away from me, what am I? Or look at what I have, look at the comp and ben package that I'm on, look at the accolades, right? And if that's taken away from me, what do I have? Or if people, this is what people are saying about me and my business, and I'm, you know, the top 100 leader, I got this award, and if that's taken away from me, what do I have? And so it's, as you said, it's a really scary thing to let go of that and just learn to settle into our true worth as human beings and express that. But that's a journey. And even for someone who ran such a successful business like Best Buy, it's interesting to hear it still took years for that journey to really be internalized and say, hey, you got to put this into practice, and you got to work at addressing some of your own demons in order to get to a place where you can really live this way. But let's go there and you know, just sort of start wrapping up with some solutions as well, and ideas and tips for our listeners. But how do you make that shift? What are some things in your experience, in your work with the leaders, that helps them to make that shift?
Yeah, that's always it's a good question, because, you know, first and foremost, you know, the saying is nobody changes until they're first self-aware. So the bringing people to a self-awareness of either the choices that they're currently making is not getting them to where they want to go, or even them just thinking about, you know, where do they really want to go. And interestingly enough, it's just by asking certain questions. You know, last year, Jim Loehr published a book, which was actually part of the 5 books I mentioned in the podcast, you know, titled Leading with Character.
Yeah,
and a question, it's a simple question he asked, and it was simply, what are you chasing? You know, what are you chasing? You know, and I've asked, you know, CEOs, and a few months ago I was speaking to a CEO who runs many companies, right? And I asked him, and I said, so what's your purpose? And his response, well, maybe nowadays I'm not as surprised, but it did surprise me, because, you know, there's a lot of energy and a lot of, and I said, you know, he said, Toye, I've never really thought about my purpose. I never really thought about it. I just get on with it. I just get on and do the next thing. And the reason why I quote this person is because, you know, yes, even bringing somebody to self-awareness could still just be self-aware. But if you're clear on your purpose, then it actually does help. So there is an order of things, in my opinion, that people need to really figure out. They need to ask themselves some very, very tough questions. You know, what do I want? You know, but who do I want to be? Because at the end of the day, what you're going to find is that many people achieve the things that they want, but they still find that something is missing.
Sure.
And so asking that question, who do I want to be? And then, you know, and I'm guessing that what will happen is you would write down character qualities most of the time, you know, because it's not what do you want, it's who do you want to be. And when you ask who do you want to be, or when you die, when you pass away, what do you want people to talk about at your funeral? And you've mentioned this as well. You know, nobody's going to say, oh, he had a great title, he was a CEO, or he was this and that. You know, it would be the people you've touched, the lives you've influenced, and that you end up with the character that you were when people engaged with you, right?
Sure.
Now, self-awareness has context. Because am I that person? Am I that person? And asking yourself certain questions around that is the first step. And then you can start to build on the character qualities that you want to be. And here's the point, because we're talking about leadership. And then obviously what you're going to find is that, what about the people that you are leading? What are they becoming? And then this now has context into leadership. In my opinion, what I try to do is to help, you know, managers and entrepreneurs become leaders, and then leaders become coaches. Because what you're going to find is that at the end of the day, the facilitation of the coaching questions is what's going to be casted down to your direct reports, that you're going to then build a company of like-minded people who are focused on becoming people of character that build an organization that does great things. But here's what I have found, you know, is that irrespective right now people are talking about your leadership around the dining table somewhere.
Sure.
And it can either be something positive or something
Yeah.
negative. And I think that's what I'm passionate about influencing. And those are some of the steps that I would sort of encourage people to take in order to be able to start moving in that right direction.
Yeah, brilliant steps. Thank you for that. So self-awareness, but not just self-awareness without any context, self-awareness within a context of your purpose and who do you want to be, and Stephen Covey talks about it as beginning with the end in mind. And I wrote that in my book, and that's been a huge thing for me. People laugh, but writing my eulogy has been so helpful because I'm quite intentional, right? I was thinking about it this morning in the shower. Believe it or not, I was thinking about the fact that I actually don't know when I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Right. I can influence it to a certain degree in that as much as possible, it's not premature. So I don't go and do stuff silly, and I don't, but generally, I don't know when I'm going to die. But what I do know is that each day I have a choice about how I live, right? How I show up, and how do I show up? Okay. Within a context of a vision I have for my life, an impact that I want to make. And so, yes, being able to ask myself, okay, how am I doing with my overall vision, the strengths, the abilities, the talents, the perspectives that I see myself having. And so for me, that's just, a great way of what you've talked about there, just bringing this to life and asking yourself questions based on who you want to be. And what I love as well about what you've said there is the really powerful thing as a leader is then passing that on. It's helping your people, ask them the questions about who do they want to be? Who are they becoming? And recognizing whether you like it or not. And this isn't so much about, your self-worth, but recognizing that as a leader, you are casting a shadow on the people around you. And it's either releasing more of their energy or taking energy from them. And how do you make sure that it's releasing more? I mean, this idea of everyone being a leader and drawing out more of that leadership from people is a powerful one for organizations and for leaders to take on board. And so thank you for sharing it and exploring it today.
There are just a few. So there are a few things that I think, thinking about this as an organization, from an organizational point of view, then I think we need to transition into thinking that organizations that we're building are now learning organizations, and because learning has to be at the core. And when learning is at the core, then this idea of everybody taking responsibility for their own learning, everybody taking responsibility for their actions becomes sort of even logical that, we have to. And so one of the ways of doing that, in our world today, as you said, there's a difference between taking in a lot of content or actually applying things. And one of the biggest challenges is that we're led by content. We think we are learning because we read a lot, and this is something that I've fallen to as well. And it was out of this that I came up with 5 daily habits that I felt like, wow, if we did this, as a learning professional, when I was putting together a leadership program in an organization for women that were going to senior leadership, I realized that, wow, if there were these 5 habits that people were applying, and for myself, and it's simply to think, every day, have a decisive kind of thought, whether it's about yourself or about life, or, just really be intentional about your thinking, because that's the first thing that you have to take charge of. And I know you talk about mental resilience, and we have to take our thoughts captive. We have to capture our own thinking and be very intentional about it. And we now know from brain science that, we strengthen our brain when we do things like mindfulness or meditate and very intentional. And in this busy world, that habit of having clarity around our thinking is the starting point. And then I would say the second thing is to plan. Be very intentional about those things that you want to do. Now in time management training, I say, look, if you can do 3 things that you plan and you can do them that day, it's a good day. And if you could do one main thing, it's still a good day, So planning, and then obviously that's the thinking, the planning, and then the do, which is the execution, and really writing the verb. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write X number of words today. I'm going to create this. I'm going to speak to this person. Be very intentional about the doing, so that it's not just I learnt it, but I actually put it into action. And then here's the part where you really get the leverage, is reflect. That's the fourth thing. You then reflect on your day. That could be in the evening or the next morning. And here's the point that I really want to stress. The first question is, what did I do well yesterday? Honestly, because we're so negative.
Yeah.
What did I do well? Capture that. And then that's the fourth thing. And then the fifth one is, what did I learn from yesterday? And just by asking that question, didn't matter if it was a bad day, there's still something to learn. Because you ask yourself the question, you find out that, I learned something. As I'm going into this new day, perhaps I can avoid it, perhaps I can. And I think that that's the DNA of surviving in our 21st century. And that is leading yourself first. And if we were all doing that, I think that we will make huge progress.
Yeah. Wow. Toye, thanks for... You started off sharing your story about just being someone who's looking for what makes a difference, what actually works, not just the theory, but what actually works. And I think you've just circled back to something practical. Anyone that gets to work with you, that knows you, that you are about just practical tips that make a difference. And so these 5 habits that you shared, just taking the time to think, taking the time to plan, taking the time to do, and some people just stop there, but miss out on the huge benefit of reflecting and thinking, what did I do well? Just reinforcing in your mind the impact that you are having. And then what did I learn from yesterday, right? And so each day, and what's powerful about that is you don't have to be in a position of leadership to do that.
Yeah.
You just have to be someone who wants to show up every day and give your absolute best. And absolutely. That's that self-mastery, that personal mastery. It's leading oneself so that you can be incredibly effective. And that is powerful. Well, I'm sure for everyone listening, we could go on. We absolutely could. And I think we'll come back because I know you're an incredible thought leader in this space. So it'd be great to have you back on again and get people to hear some of your wisdom and insight. Thank you for everything that you've shared today. A real joy to have you on. So to all our listeners and viewers, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you were taking notes. I hope you, most importantly, apply the principles. This podcast isn't just for insight and entertainment, it's for transformation. And the transformation comes when you apply these principles. And so thank you, Toye, once again for being on the show. And just to all listeners, viewers, remember that if you want to be a courageous and resilient leader, if you want to live life on purpose and with purpose, then it starts from the inside out. Have a great day and see you on the next show.
Thank you.